Hold on a second, are we really supposed to believe that Logan Paul, the social media influencer turned part-time wrestler, has any legitimate right to call out Brock Lesnar and the Vision like he's some kind of disrespected veteran who's earned his stripes in this business? Because what went down on Monday Night Raw wasn't just shocking, it was absolutely ridiculous in ways that nobody is talking about, and honestly, if you think Logan Paul is the victim in this situation, then you've completely missed what's actually happening here, and you need to wake up to the reality of how WWE is manipulating your emotions and playing you like a fiddle. Before we get into this absolute dumpster fire of a segment, I need you to drop a comment right now telling me whose side you're on, Team Logan Paul or Team Brock and the Vision, because this is about to get extremely controversial, and I guarantee by the end of this video you're going to have strong opinions that you'll want to share with everyone. Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're diving deep into one of the most talked about and frankly most infuriating segments of the entire week, and I'm not holding back on any of my thoughts about this absolute circus that WWE is trying to pass off as legitimate professional wrestling storytelling. Let me paint the complete picture of what actually happened on Raw, because the context matters tremendously if you're going to understand why this whole situation is so deeply frustrating to anyone who actually cares about the integrity of professional wrestling as an art form. Logan Paul comes strutting out to the ring with his usual cocky swagger, playing to the crowd who honestly still can't decide if they love him or hate him, and that ambivalence from the audience tells you everything you need to know about how confused WWE has made everyone about what Logan's character is supposed to represent. He starts cutting this promo about respect and loyalty and how he's proven himself in WWE, talking about sacrifices he's made and battles he's fought, and I'm sitting there thinking, proven yourself how exactly? By having a handful of matches spread out over 2 years where you were carried by actual professional wrestlers who made you look infinitely better than you had any right to look? By leveraging your social media following of millions of impressionable young fans to get opportunities that wrestlers who've been grinding in bingo halls and high school gyms for a decade never got? By showing up a few times a year when it's convenient for your schedule while actual full-time performers are out there destroying their bodies night after night in front of crowds of 200 people in towns nobody's ever heard of? Logan starts talking about how he thought he had found real allies in Brock Lesnar and the Vision, how he believed they were building something special together, some kind of dominant faction that was going to take over WWE and change the landscape of professional wrestling forever. He's going on and on about trust and brotherhood and having each other's backs through thick and thin, using all these buzzwords that sound important but ring completely hollow when you remember that Logan Paul is someone who built his fame on pranking people and filming controversial content for YouTube clicks. Then he shows footage from a few weeks ago where it looked like there was some kind of alliance forming between Logan, Brock, and members of the Vision stable, with shots of them standing together backstage, maybe some fist bumps or knowing looks exchanged, the typical visual shorthand that WWE uses to suggest that people are working together without actually developing the relationship in any meaningful way through actual storytelling and character development. Then we get to the actual betrayal that Logan is so monumentally upset about, and this is where things get really interesting and really problematic at the same time. Apparently during a match or backstage segment that happened either earlier in the same night or possibly the previous week, the timeline is deliberately vague, which is typical WWE nonsense. Logan found himself in a vulnerable position surrounded by enemies or rivals, and he expected Brock and the Vision to come running to his aid like the loyal allies he believed them to be. But instead, in what Logan is presenting as the ultimate act of treachery and cowardice, they either didn't show up at all or even worse, they actively turned on him and helped his enemies beat him down. The footage they showed was deliberately chaotic, with multiple people involved and cameras shaking and quick cuts that made it hard to see exactly what happened, which is a production technique WWE uses when they want to preserve some ambiguity or when they're trying to hide the fact that the actual sequence of events doesn't make much logical sense if you examine it too closely. Logan is selling this betrayal like it's the worst thing that's ever happened in the entire history of professional wrestling, like Brock Lesnar and the Vision have committed some unforgivable sin against the sanctity of brotherhood and loyalty. He's calling Brock Lesnar a coward, which is absolutely laughable considering Brock's legitimate background as a UFC heavyweight champion and one of the most physically intimidating human beings to ever step foot in a wrestling ring. He's saying the Vision are nothing but opportunistic snakes who can't be trusted, who will turn on anyone the moment it becomes convenient for them, painting them as the worst kind of villains you can imagine in wrestling. He's demanding that they come out to the ring right this second and face him man to man and explain themselves, justify their actions, give him some kind of closure or understanding about why they would do this to him after everything they'd supposedly been through together. The crowd is eating it up because drama is drama and people love to see conflict and confrontation, especially when it involves someone as polarizing as Logan Paul and someone as legendary as Brock Lesnar. But I'm watching this and thinking about how utterly absurd it is that Logan Paul of all people is positioning himself as someone who deserves loyalty and respect from established WWE figures who've actually earned their place in this industry through years of blood, sweat, tears, and sacrifices that Logan couldn't possibly understand. Here's what really gets me legitimately angry about this whole situation and makes my blood boil every time I think about it. Logan Paul has been in WWE for what, 2 years at the absolute most? And during those 2 years, how many matches has he actually had? I can count them on my fingers. He's had a handful of high-profile matches, most of them at premium live events where he gets weeks or even months to prepare for one specific opponent, working with agents and coaches and veteran wrestlers who help him plan out every single move and sequence so that he looks as good as possible. He doesn't work the weekly grind of television tapings where you're performing multiple times a week in different cities with different opponents. He doesn't work house shows on weekends where you're wrestling in front of a few thousand people for no television exposure, just to keep your skills sharp and to earn your paycheck. He doesn't pay his dues in the traditional sense that wrestlers have for generations, starting at the bottom of the card, working opening matches that nobody remembers, slowly building credibility and skills and connections until you earn the respect of your peers and the trust of the audience. Logan came into WWE with a built-in fan base of millions of social media followers who would watch anything he does regardless of quality, and that gave him immediate leverage that translated into opportunities that other performers would literally kill for. He got to wrestle at WrestleMania in a high-profile match. He got programs with main event level talent. He got promotional push and media attention that full-time roster members can only dream about. And now he's out here acting like he's earned the right to call out Brock Lesnar, one of the most legitimate and accomplished performers in WWE history, a man who was NCAA Division I heavyweight wrestling champion, who became the youngest WWE champion ever at one point, who went to UFC and became heavyweight champion there, who has main event countless WrestleManias and who is arguably one of the biggest box office draws in the history of professional wrestling. The entitlement is absolutely staggering, and what makes it even worse is that WWE is booking this like Logan's outrage is completely justified and we should all be sympathetic to his plight, like he's the wrong party in this situation who deserves our support and our emotional investment. Let's talk about Brock Lesnar specifically for a minute because his involvement in this storyline is particularly bizarre and frankly doesn't make much sense if you know anything about how Brock has been booked throughout his entire WWE career. Brock is not someone who typically forms alliances or stables or partnerships with other wrestlers. He's always been presented as a lone wolf mercenary who shows up, destroys whoever WWE puts in front of him, collects his paycheck, and leaves. He's had Paul Heyman as his advocate and manager, sure, but that's a different dynamic than being part of an actual wrestling faction. The idea that Brock would have formed any kind of meaningful partnership with Logan Paul in the first place absolutely strains credibility to the breaking point, and if it did somehow happen, there's absolutely no way that Brock would have viewed it as anything other than a temporary arrangement of convenience that he could end whenever it suited his purposes. Brock Lesnar doesn't do loyalty in the traditional wrestling sense, he does what's best for Brock Lesnar, and that's been his character for decades now. So for Logan Paul to act shocked and betrayed and wounded that Brock Lesnar turned on him shows either incredible naivete about how professional wrestling works and how Brock specifically operates, or it's just lazy character writing where Logan is supposed to be this sympathetic figure who got screwed over by the big bad heels and now we're all supposed to rally behind him. Either way it absolutely doesn't work because Logan's entire persona up to this point has been the cocky outsider who thinks he's better than everyone else, who talks trash about how he's more athletic and more marketable than the full-time roster, who positions himself as above the traditional wrestling business. So suddenly playing the victim of betrayal, suddenly being the one who trusted too much and got hurt, it feels completely inconsistent with everything we've seen from his character, and that inconsistency makes it impossible to get emotionally invested in his plight because we don't really know who Logan Paul is supposed to be from week to week. The vision as a stable is also worth examining in detail here because depending on who's actually in this group and what their position is on the card, Logan calling them out could mean very different things and have very different implications for the wrestlers involved. If the vision includes established stars who've been in WWE for years, people who have name recognition and credibility in championship history, then Logan challenging them becomes this David versus Goliath story where he's punching above his weight class and setting himself up for a beating that he probably deserves and that most fans would love to see. But if the vision is comprised of newer talent who are trying to make names for themselves, younger wrestlers who are still building their characters and establishing themselves on the main roster, then this becomes even more problematic because it's Logan using his platform and his position and his outside fame to potentially bury wrestlers who don't have his social media following or his mainstream name recognition or his leverage within the company. WWE has a terrible habit of putting celebrity wrestlers over actual full-time talent in ways that hurt the long-term credibility of the roster and make it harder for regular wrestlers to be taken seriously by casual fans. We've seen it happen over and over again throughout WWE history. We've seen celebrities come in for one match or one angle, they get treated like they're just as good or even better than the professionals who do this for a living, they get the big win or the big moment, and then they leave while the full-time roster is left looking weaker and less special. This Logan Paul situation feels like it could be heading in exactly the direction where he comes out of this looking strong and dominant at the expense of people who actually dedicate their entire lives to this business, who sacrifice their bodies and their relationships and their long-term health to entertain us week after week. And that's not just frustrating, it's insulting to everyone who's ever laced up a pair of boots and stepped through those ropes with dreams of making it in professional wrestling. What really bothers me on a fundamental level is how WWE is framing this narrative like we're supposed to automatically side with Logan Paul without question. The way the segment was shot with dramatic lighting and close UPS on Logan's face, the way the announcers were reacting with shock and sympathy in their voices, the way Logan was allowed to dominate the microphone time and present his version of events without any immediate pushback or contradiction, it all suggests that WWE sees Logan as a babyface in this situation, a good guy who was wronged by the dastardly heels Brock and the Vision. But Logan Paul is not a babyface, or at least he shouldn't be given his history both inside and outside of WWE. He's someone who came into this company as an outsider with a massive ego and a sense of entitlement, who's had success through a combination of natural athleticism and being protected by veteran workers who knew exactly how to structure matches to hide his weaknesses and emphasize his strengths, and who represents everything that a lot of traditional wrestling fans actively dislike about the modern era where social media clout and follower counts matter more than years of training in wrestling, schools and paying dues on the independent circuit. The confrontation that followed Logan's call-out promo was also extremely telling in terms of how WWE views this situation and where they're planning to take this storyline. Members of the Vision eventually came out to the ring, there was a heated exchange of words with lots of pointing and shouting and aggressive body language, some shoving and chest bumping that suggested things were about to get physical, and it looks like we're building toward either a singles match between Logan and one of the Vision members or possibly some kind of multi-person match at an upcoming premium live event. Maybe Survivor Series or the Royal Rumble or whatever big show WWE has coming up next on their calendar. Security and referees had to get involved to separate everyone and restore order, which is standard wrestling television protocol when you want to build anticipation for a future match without giving away too much in the initial confrontation. But notably and significantly, Brock Lesnar didn't appear during this segment at all, which makes sense from a business standpoint because Brock's appearances are very carefully managed and he's not going to show up for just any random Raw episode without a significant financial incentive. But that absence also makes Logan's big dramatic call-out feel somewhat empty and hollow because he's standing there yelling into the void about Brock without actually having to back it up in the moment, without actually having to face the consequences of disrespecting someone as dangerous as Brock Lesnar. It's easy to call someone out and talk tough when you know they're not going to be there to respond, when you know you can say whatever you want without immediate physical repercussions. If Brock had actually been there, if he had walked out during Logan's promo, the entire dynamic would have been different and Logan probably would have looked a lot less confident and a lot more concerned about his own safety. Let me address what I know some of you are probably thinking right now, which is that I'm being too harsh on Logan Paul and not giving him enough credit for the work he's put in and the surprisingly good matches he's had during his limited time in WWE. And look, I'll completely concede that Logan is significantly more athletically talented than your average celebrity who steps into a wrestling ring for a publicity stunt. He's clearly in excellent physical condition. He obviously takes the wrestling side of things seriously enough to train extensively and prepare for his matches. He's shown good instincts for timing and positioning and understanding how to work with a crowd. He's had some moments that were genuinely impressive from a pure physical standpoint, moves that looked smooth and impactful, selling that seemed natural and believable. I'm not saying Logan Paul has no talent whatsoever or that he hasn't worked hard to be as good as he is. But here's the thing, being athletic and having a few good matches that were carefully choreographed and protected by veteran wrestlers doesn't mean you've earned the right to be positioned at the same level as people who've dedicated their entire adult lives to professional wrestling. It doesn't mean you deserve to be in main event programs with legends like Brock Lesnar. It doesn't mean you should be taking television time and pay-per-view spots away from wrestlers who've spent years perfecting their craft. Logan Paul is a tourist in this business, a very talented and committed tourist perhaps, but a tourist nonetheless, someone who's visiting wrestling for a while because it's fun and profitable and gives him content for his social media channels, but who could leave at any moment if he gets bored or if a better opportunity comes along in another field. And WWE treating him like he's on the same level as their full-time roster creates this weird dissonance where nothing feels like it has real stakes or consequences, because we all know Logan isn't actually committed to this business the way that full-time wrestlers are. The betrayal angle itself is also just incredibly lazy and unimaginative storytelling that we've seen done better 1,000 times before. Betrayals and heel turns and people getting screwed over by their supposed allies, these are some of the most overused tropes in the entire wrestling industry. They can work brilliantly when they're done right, when there's real emotional investment and proper character development and logical motivations that make sense. But for this particular betrayal angle to work and feel fresh and make us actually care, there needs to be some deeper motivation or some clever twist or some unexpected element that makes us understand why Brock and the Vision turned on Logan specifically. What did Logan do to deserve this? Was he becoming too arrogant or demanding? Did he disrespect them in some way? Was there a specific incident that caused the relationship to break down? Did someone manipulate the situation behind the scenes? But from what we've seen so far in this storyline, it just seems like Brock and the Vision turned on Logan because that's what heels do in wrestling. They betray people to generate heat and set up matches. There's no nuance, there's no complex reasoning, there's no moral ambiguity or interesting character work. It's just bad guys doing bad guy things to give Logan a reason to be angry and to set up matches that WWE can promote for their next premium live event. That's not compelling storytelling that makes me want to tune in next week to see what happens. That's just going through the motions and hoping that Logan's name value and Brock's legendary reputation will be enough to make people care without actually putting in the work to craft a story that resonates emotionally. I also can't help but think about how this situation must look from the perspective of the actual full-time WWE roster who are backstage watching Logan Paul get this incredible spotlight and this high-profile storyline with Brock Lesnar handed to him on a silver platter. There are wrestlers who've been with WWE for 5, 10, even 15 years, who show up to work every single week whether they're feeling great or injured or sick, who've never missed a show, who've done everything the company has ever asked of them, and who would absolutely kill for the opportunity to have a program with Brock Lesnar. They would love to be featured in this prominent a position on Monday Night Raw, to get this much promo time, to be part of a storyline that everyone is talking about on social media. And instead it's going to someone who shows up a few times a year when his busy schedule permits, when he doesn't have other business ventures or content creation projects that take priority. That has to create massive resentment and frustration within the locker room, even if nobody says it publicly because they don't want to be seen as difficult or unprofessional. While wrestlers are ultimately professionals who will work with whoever they're asked to work with and will do their best to make any storyline succeed, it's impossible not to feel like Logan is cutting in line and taking opportunities from people who've earned them through years and years of hard work and dedication and sacrifice. It sends a message to everyone in that locker room that your years of service don't matter as much as your social media following, that being loyal to WWE and grinding week after week is less valuable than being a celebrity who can bring mainstream attention for a few months. That's a demoralizing message that can't be good for overall morale or for the long-term health of the company's roster and their relationship with their full-time performers. The fan reaction to this angle has been predictably and intensely divided, with Logan's young fan base naturally defending him and supporting him and arguing that he's earned his position through his athletic performances, while traditional wrestling fans who've been watching for decades are mostly rolling their eyes or actively rooting against him and hoping to see him get destroyed by Brock or the Vision. Social media has been absolutely full of heated debates about whether Logan deserves this push, whether the betrayal angle makes any sense given the characters involved, whether WWE is making the right call by featuring Logan so prominently, and whether anyone actually wants to see Logan Paul in high-profile matches at upcoming premium live events or if this is just WWE forcing him down our throats because they're obsessed with mainstream attention and celebrity crossovers. WWE is probably absolutely thrilled with all this controversy and debate because in their minds any engagement is good engagement. Anytime people are talking about their product and arguing about their creative decisions is a win because it means people are paying attention. But there's a crucial difference between controversy that makes people want to watch to see what happens next and controversy that makes people tune out because they're tired of celebrity wrestlers being pushed over actual talent and they'd rather spend their time watching wrestling companies that respect the art form and the performers who dedicate their lives to it. I strongly suspect this situation is more of the latter than the former, that this Logan Paul push is turning off more hardcore wrestling fans than it's attracting casual viewers, but we'll have to see how it plays out in terms of actual measurable metrics like television viewership numbers and live event attendance and merchandise sales. Looking ahead to where this storyline is presumably going, the most likely scenario based on typical WWE booking patterns is that this builds to Logan Paul facing someone from the Vision at the next premium live event, probably in a singles match or maybe a tag team match if they want to involve more people. Maybe Brock Lesnar gets physically involved somehow during that match, either costing Logan the victory or perhaps surprisingly helping him, setting up an even bigger match down the line between Logan and Brock themselves. Logan will probably win his match regardless of who he's facing because WWE seems completely committed to keeping him looking strong and dominant so that his sporadic appearances feel like big deals and special attractions, even though having him consistently beat full-time wrestlers who work the schedule year-round undermines those wrestlers and makes the whole roster look weaker and less credible in the eyes of fans. Then eventually, probably at WrestleMania or SummerSlam or another major stadium show where WWE can maximize the promotional value and mainstream media coverage, we'll get Logan Paul vs. Brock Lesnar in a match that WWE will promote as this huge dream match between a social media superstar and a legitimate combat sports legend. It'll be all over sports media and entertainment websites. Logan will promote it heavily to his millions of followers, and WWE will act like this is the most important match in wrestling history even though most hardcore fans will see it for what it really is, which is WWE capitalizing on Logan's outside fame while giving Brock another big money payday. The match itself will probably be perfectly decent from a pure execution standpoint because Brock is skilled enough and experienced enough to carry Logan through a competent performance, but it won't change the fundamental problem, which is that part-time celebrity wrestlers shouldn't be taking premium spots and main event positions from the people who carry WWE week in and week out and who've actually earned those positions through years of dedication. So where do I ultimately stand on all this after breaking down every aspect of this situation? I think Logan Paul calling out Brock Lesnar and the Vision is WWE's transparent attempt to create artificial controversy and social media buzz around someone who frankly doesn't deserve the elevated position he's been given based solely on his work within the company and his actual wrestling credentials. I think the betrayal angle is lazy and unoriginal and relies entirely on tropes we've seen a million times before without adding anything new or interesting. I think this whole situation perfectly exemplifies everything that frustrates longtime hardcore wrestling fans about modern WWE, which is the consistent prioritization of celebrity appearances and mainstream media attention and viral social media moments over long-term storytelling and character development and the proper cultivation and development of their full-time roster who are the foundation of the entire company. Logan Paul is talented, I absolutely won't deny that basic fact. The guy is a legitimate athlete who's worked hard to be as competent in the ring as he is. But talent alone isn't enough and shouldn't be enough to justify pushing someone to the top of the card over people who've actually paid their dues the traditional way and dedicated their entire lives to this industry and this art form. Professional wrestling is built on a foundation of respect and tradition and the understanding that you earn your position through hard work and perseverance and proving yourself night after night in front of audiences who can smell fake effort from a mile away. Logan Paul represents a shortcut around all of that, a way to skip to the front of the line based on outside fame rather than wrestling merit, and embracing that approach sets a dangerous precedent for the future of the business. If you've somehow stuck with me through this entire lengthy video and listened to all my thoughts and opinions on this frustrating situation, I genuinely appreciate your time and attention and I hope you found this breakdown valuable and thought-provoking. Drop a comment below telling me if you agree with my perspective or if you think I'm being unfairly harsh on Logan Paul and not giving him enough credit for what he's accomplished in his limited time in WWE. Let me know if you're actually excited to see where this storyline goes or if you're as frustrated as I am with celebrity wrestlers taking spots from full-time talent. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel with that notification bell turned on because I'll absolutely be following this angle as it develops week by week and giving you my completely unfiltered thoughts on where it goes and how it ultimately plays out. Thanks so much for watching this deep dive into one of wrestling's most controversial current storylines, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll undoubtedly have even more WWE nonsense to discuss and dissect.